My name is Bessie. I am 68 years old and have lived for more than 30 years in this same house, in the Elizabeth neighborhood of Charlotte. Here I raised my son. Here I buried my husband. Here I thought I would spend my last years in peace. But tell me, have you ever felt like a stranger inside your own home? Have you ever noticed that, even surrounded by family, you were completely alone? I was just a mom who needed help after hip surgery. Marcus, my only son, offered to come live with me with his wife, Rachel. They brought suitcases, promised care, spoke of gratitude. At first it looked beautiful, but everything began to change. And when I say everything, that's all. Maybe you've come this far feeling like there's something wrong in your house too. Or maybe you're trying to make sense of that silence that has stood between you and your children. I understand. And what I'm going to tell you now is not a soap opera story. It's a real memory. Painful. In this video, I'm going to show you how a simple security camera, forgotten in a corner of the room, recorded more than images. He recorded the truth. And this truth, it changed my life. But before we dive into the heart of this story, I need you to know one thing. I didn't scream. Not that I had no reason, because what I saw in that recording made me freeze. My son and his wife, sitting on the couch in my living room, with my document folder open on their laps, discussing dates, values, and a so-called transfer agreement of the house, as if I had already died, as if I wasn't there, alive, breathing, sleeping a few meters away. They thought I didn't know anything, but the camera, the one they thought was still broken, recorded everything. And it was at that moment, alone, holding the cell phone with a trembling hand, that I decided, I'm not going to beg. I'll watch. And at the right time, I will act. If you've ever felt that someone in your own family has treated you like a nuisance, or if you've ever shut up a pain so as not to make things worse, this story is for you. And if somehow my voice has touched you this far, I ask you, stay with me. Press the like button, subscribe to the channel, and give me your company in this video. Sometimes, we just need to be heard by someone who understands. And I'm here, in my own way, trying to turn a hurt into strength. My house has always been very quiet, but it was a good silence. The one we choose. I woke up early, drank my coffee slowly on the front porch, watching the neighbors hurry to work. Everyone here in Elizabeth knows me as Miss Bessie. I was always smiling, talking to everyone, but without interfering. After Charles was gone, he will be 14 years old, I learned to live with my own presence. And you know what? I had made peace with that. My routine was simple, but it was mine. I took care of the garden with affection, put instrumental jazz quietly in the living room, read the same old books on the shelf as if they were new, and every Tuesday I went to the community center to play bingo with the girls. Sometimes I missed family Sundays, but I understood. Marcus had his life. He lived in Atlanta, he was always busy, and I never wanted to get in the way. When he called me saying that he had lost his job, that Rachel was going through a rough patch, and that they might need to restructure for a while, my first impulse was to open my arms. A son is a son, isn't it? I didn't think twice. Of course, honey. The house is too big just for me. And so it was that, on a clear Saturday, they arrived with suitcases, boxes, and promises. Rachel got out of the car with a forced smile. Marcus tried to disguise his fatigue. I tidied up the guest room with the white sheets that I only use for special visits. I prepared lasagna, put fresh juice on the table, and thought I was doing the right thing. Our hearts are easily deceived when hope knocks on the door. In the first few days, it was good. The house gained voices. Marcus helped me go shopping. Rachel said she would cook sometimes for me. We talked about the past, laughed, remembering his father, Charles, always forgetting where he put his glasses. I thought that was a new beginning, that maybe, at the end of my life, I would have a full home again, a family close by. But it didn't take long for me to notice that the sweet words were becoming scarcer and scarcer. Rachel began to spend the whole day locked in her room, and when she left, she spoke softly, as if she was annoyed by everything. Marcus kept on the computer saying that he was sending a resume, but he never told if he had gotten an interview. When I asked, he just grumbled. The kitchen, once so organized, was now filled with dirty dishes, open packages, and leftover food, but I kept quiet. I would go there and clean it. After all, they were going through a difficult time. And a mother who is a mother can take it a little longer. Until one morning, I went to have my coffee and my favorite mug, the blue one with a hand-painted lotus flower, was not in place. I searched the whole house. The next day, an embroidered towel disappeared from the drawer. Little things, you know. Silly little things that seem like nothing. But I knew every corner of that house. Each object had its place. I began to feel a discomfort that I could not explain, as if something was out of place inside me too. Once, I went to the closet to get an envelope where I kept old receipts. When I opened the folder, some papers were out of order. An insurance contract, which was always tied with a clip, was loose. Another extract was oddly folded. I felt a shiver, but still, I tried not to think badly. We who love too much doubt our own instinct to protect those we love. It was around this time that I stopped hearing my name at home. Marcus called me mother, in a dry tone, as if repeating an obligation. Rachel, not even that. It was always she, or just silence. When I said something about the house, or about the bills, Rachel would turn up her nose. One night, I heard her saying through the crack in the room, "She's lucky we're here." Look, pause. Let me tell you something. Have you ever had the feeling that your presence bothers you? As if suddenly, the one you love starts treating you like a weight that has not been let go because it is still breathing? If you've ever felt this, comment here. I've lived it. Because it's hard to keep that kind of sadness alone. And even so, I kept trying. I prepared a special dinner on a Sunday. I made roast chicken and potatoes and that rice and almonds that Marcus loved when he was little. I set the table, lit the candles, waited. They didn't go down. When I knocked on the door, Rachel replied impatiently, "We've already ordered food." They didn't even look at what I had done. I collected everything in silence. That night, I ate alone at the table. A table set for 3, but occupied by only 1. That's when I started to think, was I wrong to let them in? Could it be that, wanting to help, I opened the door to my own end? But something even stranger awaited me. Days later, when I looked at a bank account, I realized that the value of the card had doubled. I called the central and asked for the details. There were purchases that I didn't recognize. Electronics store, Asian restaurant, car rental. I didn't do any of those things. The additional card was with Rachel. I was beginning to suspect that there was something more, something bigger. But what I never imagined, it's just that they weren't just spending. They were planning. And what happened on any given afternoon, when I opened the camera app and watched a forgotten recording, it was the crack that was missing. They were on the couch, talking about selling, speaking of passing the deed, talking about me like I'm not alive. And then I froze. But what did I do next? That you will need to listen calmly, because that's where everything started to turn. And neither they, nor I, were prepared for what would come next. After that night, when I heard my own son talking about the sale of my house as if I was no longer there, I began to see everything with different eyes, and it didn't take long to realize that the small changes I had been trying to ignore, they were not that small. Rachel started to keep the car key, saying it was for safety, so I don't go out alone and get hurt again. When I needed to go to the pharmacy to get my medicines, she said she could order online, but she never did. Marcus, for his part, was locked in the makeshift office in his father's old bedroom, saying he was connected with recruiters. But the days passed, and he never mentioned an interview, a proposal, nothing. I also started to find the house bills strange. The light vaccine, for example, came twice as high. When I asked, Rachel replied with an embarrassed smile, "You must have forgotten to turn something off." But I knew I didn't. I turned everything off. I always turned it off. Even the lamps in the hallway. More than once I went to the drawer of old bills and realized that papers were missing, or placed out of order. And every time I said something, Rachel twisted her mouth as if listening to someone half senile. He began to correct me loudly, even in front of the visitor. "It wasn't Monday, Bessie. It was Wednesday. You're getting confused." I was mute, and deep down, with shame. They were even messing with my memory. That's it. It hurts in a way that I can't explain. Gradually, I began to realize that meals were no longer shared. When I made food, they ate in silence, without even a compliment. When they didn't even call me. Sometimes I heard muffled laughter in their room, and the television was loud. I would go downstairs, put my plate alone, and eat feeling that each spoonful of rice weighed more than my body. I was there, but it was as if it wasn't. One day, I went to look for my checkbook to pay the janitor who repairs the gate. Gone. I called him and apologized. He said he would pay the following week. I searched everything. Nothing. The folder with my documents was also different. My retirement papers, my bank account, even my deed, were stirred. When I called Marcus in the corner and asked, he sighed and replied, "Mom, are you sure you didn't keep it somewhere else? Look, we need to talk about his memory." And there I understood. They weren't just messing with my stuff. They were messing with me, fading little by little, repositioning myself as a woman who no longer thinks straight, that he no longer remembers, that no longer rules. It's cruel. Cruel because it is silent. No one yells at you in the face that you have lost value. They just stop listening to your voice. They stop warning you about things. They stop waiting for you in decisions. And before you know it, you're a guest in the house where you've been a mother, a woman, and a bedrock for decades. That was making me sick inside. I was beginning to doubt myself. She was afraid to complain and look ungrateful. After all, they said they were there to help me. But how to help? Making me feel invisible? Or making me doubt my sanity? I tried to react. I tried to write the bills for the month in an agenda. Marcus took the diary one day and said, "Why is that, Mom? You will get tired for nothing. Leave it to us." But I didn't let him. I kept quiet, but I wrote everything down later, in my old notebook, the one with the recipes. I hid it behind the medicine cabinet. I began to observe, and every night before going to sleep, I asked myself, is it me, or is there something bigger going on? Once, I got up to drink water and heard Rachel's voice in the hallway. "She's slower than we thought." I felt my body freeze. I went back to the room, sat on the bed, and stayed there. Stop, in the dark, thinking about where I got lost. Does loving too much blind us? Is trusting one's own child foolish now? And that morning, for the first time in years, I prayed softly, but not to ask for protection. I prayed for clarity, because something told me that it was all going to get worse. And, indeed, worse. Because the next morning, as I pretended to read on the living room couch, I heard the word interdiction coming out of Marcus's mouth on the phone. If we get a report, maybe we can advance everything. That went through me like a knife. I still didn't know exactly what they were up to. But one thing I was sure of, it wasn't just negligence. It was flat. It was cold. And it was urgent. And then, in the midst of this silent whirlwind, I remembered something I had let go of years ago. A camera. An old security system that my Charles installed before he passed away. Did it still work? Could it be that? Was that where I was going to find the answer? It was on a Sunday, one of those that seemed longer than usual, that I realized how much my presence no longer meant anything in that house. I woke up early, as always, put on my blue polka dot nightgown, and went downstairs to prepare my coffee. The house was silent. Strange. I called for Marcus. I called for Rachel. No response. I walked to the front door. Their car was gone. No tickets. No message. Only emptiness. I stood there on the porch, looking at the street without movement, with a bitter taste in my mouth and a knot in my chest. I went back inside, sat on the couch and waited. I waited as if waiting to be remembered. Hours passed. I had lunch of what was left over from the night before, heated in the microwave. When I went to take my medicines, I realized that they were stored on the bottom shelf of the refrigerator, at the very bottom. I lowered it slowly, felt the pain in my hip, almost lost my balance. Who would store my pills there, where I can barely reach? That was no longer carelessness. It was disinterest. It was negligence. And it was deliberate. When they finally returned in the late afternoon, Rachel came in laughing loudly, carrying bags. Marcus walked right past me and just said, "The credit card maxed out again. We will need to talk about these expenses." I kept silent, because what I really wanted was to cry, but I learned that crying in front of those who hurt you, it is giving ammunition. I went to the bedroom. I locked myself in. I lay on the bed with my gaze fixed on the ceiling, remembering the time when Marcus came to me to ask for help with the school bills, and I did everything so that he never missed anything. How things change. At dinner, I sat at the table trying to start a conversation. I told her about a book I was rereading, I told her that neighbor Donna had stopped by early to leave a piece of peach pie. Rachel, with a mocking smile, replied, "These period soap operas you watch are making you too nostalgic." Marcus didn't even look in my direction, and at that moment I felt that was left over, like an old piece of furniture that is still there by custom, an object with history, but no longer function. I retreated in silence, and it was in this silence that I heard Rachel in the hallway, whispering on the phone with someone. "She's not even going to last long. It's a matter of time." Those words, they pierced my skin like a knife. I don't know if she spoke out of malice or conviction. I just know that, of all the pains I've ever felt, none was like this. I, who had lived so much, raised children, buried husbands, endured sleepless nights working in hospitals. Now it was treated as a countdown, like a deadline, like a wait that has a date to end. I spent the next few days in silence. Neighbor Donna noticed. He rang the doorbell, looked me in the eyes, and said, "You're different, Bessie. What's going on in here?" I smiled, said it was just the cold in my bones. But she knew it wasn't. I saw in her eyes that I knew, but no one could help me. Neither did she. That was mine to bear. My name, my home, my pain. At night, I started sleeping with the bedroom door locked, not out of fear, but for protection. It was as if I needed a physical boundary between myself and the disguised evil that surrounded the house. And even there, locked up, alone in the dark, I was still trying to find a reason, a mistake of mine, something I could have done to justify all that. But there was nothing but love offered, wasted love, and a confidence that was being trampled on every day. Until one cold morning, I got up to drink water and found Rachel sitting on the sofa in the living room, going through my document folder, that same folder that was locked in the dresser in my room. When she saw me, she closed it quickly and said she was looking for a prescription for the natural remedy we had talked about. I didn't answer. I just watched, and it was there that I knew I couldn't postpone it any longer. That forgotten camera at the top of the bookshelf. Maybe it was my last chance to record what I could no longer prove with words alone. But what would she record? It has surpassed even my worst forebodings. Because the first image she captured after working again, it wasn't just a crime. It was an irreversible betrayal. And what I heard on that recording, you won't believe it. When that ADT technician arrived here at home, my soul was tired. Tired of walking on eggshells, of being silent when I wanted to scream, of living in fear inside my own home. The boy was young, polite, called me ma'am all the time. He climbed on the shelf, dusted the old cameras, changed a cable, did signal tests, and in the end, installed an app on my cell phone. Now you can see everything in real time, through the screen. Camera in the living room, the kitchen, the entrance, everything working. I smiled, thanked him with a corn cake I had made in the morning, and put that cell phone away like someone who keeps a magic key. But do you know what I forgot? To warn Marcus. The following days passed like the previous ones. Heavy footsteps around the house, low voices that disappeared when I approached, long silences at meals. On the third day after the repair, it was a Thursday, cloudy afternoon, wind coming in through the crack in the laundry window. Rachel left, saying she was going to the market. Marcus said something about solving insurance paperwork. I was left alone. At least that's what they said. I sat in my corner of the room. I picked up my cell phone on impulse. I opened the new app, still not knowing how to use it. When I clicked on the camera in the room, I almost dropped the device on the floor. The image was clear. They were there, in my living room, the coffee table covered with papers, the gray folder where I keep my most important documents, the same one Rachel said she had never touched, was open. They hadn't left. They had lied. My heart raced. My hands trembled. I took a deep breath. In the corner of the screen, I saw a button with a microphone icon. Touched. The sound came, and it was as if the world stopped. "We need the original script," Marcus said, his voice calm. "With this, Albert is able to forge the new transfer without arousing suspicion. Forge, transfer, deed." Rachel replied soon after, with a tone of impatience. "But where did she keep the old stamp? Without that, Albert does nothing. It will arouse suspicion at the registry office." Marcus sighed. "If she disappears with that, we lose the chance." And you can't wait long. You heard what the doctor said about her hip. She's slower. I froze. Literally. The body stopped. The head spun. I was listening to my son and his wife planning, calmly, calculatingly, a coup against me. Using my name, my history, my house. They had an accomplice. He had a name. He had a plan. He was in a hurry. And I was just the obstacle. The old one they were hoping to make room. The anger I felt, it wasn't screaming. It was silencing. An anger that flowed slowly, like hot water on the skin. And there, listening to everything, I understood that the time for doubt was over. I wasn't exaggerating. I wasn't imagining things. That was real. It was dirty, and it was cruel. And look, if you're still here listening to this story, I need to ask you a favor. I'm here opening my heart, telling something I've never told anyone, remembering wounds that didn't even heal properly. So, if you can, leave a like on that video, subscribe to the channel. It's just a click for you, but for me, it's as if you said, I hear you, Bessie. And sometimes, everything a woman my age needs, it is to be truly heard. I looked at the video again. Rachel took something out of her bag. A pen drive. Here are the models that Albert sent. All that's left is for her to sign, and disappear with the old one. Marcus replied, she's going to sign it? He doesn't even know what's what anymore. That sentence cut me inside. He doesn't even know what's what anymore. They were counting on my confusion. With the tiredness of my body, with the weight of the years, they were counting on me to be stupid, that I was weak. But they forgot that who survived the death of her husband, who raised a child alone on a nurse's salary, who stood when her life collapsed. It is not weak. I had just woken up. And they didn't know it yet. But what I decided to do after that recording, it's what changes everything. Because the next step I took, they never imagined. And that's when justice began to be born, right in the silence of my living room. Do you know why? Because I saw with my own eyes the exact moment when my son died to me. And at that very moment, another woman was born in my place. Want to know what she did? Just wait. You will understand. I watched that recording 7 times. 7. The same video, the same faces, the same words. At first, I still hoped that I had heard it wrong, that I had understood it out of context. We always try to save those we love, even when we already know we have been hurt. But with each repetition, the truth became clearer. It was not a mistake. It was a plan. And it wasn't just any plan. It was calculated, cold, rehearsed. Marcus held the papers as if holding a business contract, not his own mother's documents. She won't understand even if we sign in front of her, he said, with the naturalness of someone who talks about changing a tire. Rachel laughed, that thin laugh that oozes venom. With or without Alzheimer's, she signs. Then we say it was confusion. That was it. They wanted me to sign. They thought I was confused enough not to notice. They thought they could bury me alive in some nursing home, sell my house, pocket everything, and continue their lives as if nothing had happened. And all that, with help. A name appeared there, with frightening naturalness. Albert Carrington. Albert has already got everything ready, Marcus said. He said he only needs the signature and the scanned version of the deed. The rest he solves. Rachel confirmed. He sent the power of attorney and interdiction templates. Just fill it out. I took an old notebook, one of those I used to write down recipes, and started writing everything down. Name, phrases, dates, times. I didn't tremble anymore. It was as if, after the pain, he had entered another state, an icy lucidity, a kind of clarity that is only born when we have lost everything. Because there, sitting alone in my room, reviewing a betrayal that was unfolding in front of the cameras that I had repaired myself, I realized that something inside me had changed. It wasn't just hurt. I already felt hurt before. That was something else. It was focus. It was a decision. It was a thirst for justice. I didn't want revenge. I wanted dignity. I wanted them to see and know that I saw it all, that I understood everything, that the mother they tried to erase, it was still there. I thought about confronting Marcus that very night, look him in the eye and ask why. But no, it was early. And do you know why? Because I needed proof, hard evidence. He needed time. I needed to see how far they would go. Because only when we see how far someone is capable of going is that he understands the size of the evil that surrounds us. That same day, I feigned a headache. I stayed in the room. Marcus knocked on the door and asked if I needed anything. I replied in a whisper, "No, my son. I just want to rest." And he replied, "That's right. Anything, call." The coldness in his voice was now evident. I knew it. And he didn't know that I knew. And that was my trump card. But the recording of that afternoon was just the beginning. What happened in the following days, it was what sealed my fate. And it was also what opened the door to something that neither they nor I could predict. Want to know what else that camera showed? You will be surprised. Because there is betrayal that we see. And there is betrayal that we feel even when we close our eyes. And this, it was both. That night, after writing down every detail of the conversation I heard, I closed the notebook carefully, put it on my lap, and stared at nothing. The lampshade shadowed the old wallpaper Charles chose with me in the 90s, when we still had plans to redecorate the entire house. But there was never any money left for that. Life demanded priorities. Life has always demanded too much of me, and I always did. I sat there, in the middle of my room, and began to remember the things that no one sees when they look at an old woman sitting in silence. I remembered the late nights on duty at Presbyterian Medical Center, when my feet hurt so much that I would take off my shoes hidden behind the nursing counter just for 5 minutes of relief. Double shift, bitter coffee, back pain, and no recognition. But I kept going, because I had a child to raise. I remember when Marcus got sick, when he was still small, a fever that wouldn't subside, his face hot as embers. I spent 3 nights in a row awake, alternating between compresses and prayers. On the 4th day, I took him to the hospital in my arms, without eating, without sleeping, with the whole month's salary spent on antibiotics. I was a mother. She was a nurse. That was all. And he didn't ask for anything in return. There was one time he fell off his bike and opened his chin. Blood, despair, crying. I rushed him to the hospital, and, in the waiting room, I got on my knees holding his hand as he trembled. And when the bill arrived, I sold my wedding ring to pay what was missing in the rent that month. Charles was already gone. I only had myself and my love for that boy. I never let it be missed. Never. His college was also a chapter that cut me inside. He wanted to study administration. I knew I wouldn't be able to afford everything, but I did what I could. I worked on weekends. I was on duty at Christmas, on New Year's Eve. I stopped buying clothes. I stopped traveling. I stopped living to see him graduate. And when I handed him the first check for the course, he cried, said, "Mom, I would be nothing without you." How did that boy become the cold man who was now plotting my ruin on the couch in my living room? As I immersed myself in these memories, I heard his phrase echoing again in my head. "She has already lived what she had to live," said as if talking about an ancient object, as someone who sees the past as a burden. And there, at that moment, something inside me burned. But it wasn't just pain. It was something older, deeper. It was a sacred indignation, the kind that is born when you know, deep in your soul, that you were right, that you gave everything, and yet you are being crushed. I took a deep breath and repeated in a low voice, "Have I lived what I had to live on?" "No, Marcus. I'm still here, and as long as I'm breathing, you won't erase who I am. I know that this part of the story is hard, heavy, but if you've come this far, listening to me, stay a little longer, because what's going to happen after that? It's what changes everything. I promise. The time will come when you will feel the same as I did, that life can take everything from us, except our courage." The next morning, I looked in the mirror and saw a tired face. Yes, but I also saw a woman who still knew how to fight, and this fight was going to start there, with silence and strategy, because what I was about to do, it wasn't just to defend myself, it was to show them, and myself, that the mother they thought they had buried, he still knew how to surprise. And the first step, it was to gather evidence. But the second would leave them groundless. Do you want to know what I did first? So hold on, because the next part, it is the beginning of the turnaround. The next day I got up earlier than usual. Before the sun even touched the kitchen windows, I was already up, with a cup of chamomile tea in my hands, and a decision boiling in my chest. If they wanted to put me out, I was going to let the smoke rise very slowly, until it stifled their plans. The first thing I did was change all the passwords to my bank accounts. I used combinations that only I would understand. The name of the dog I had as a child. The number of the room where Charles was hospitalized the last time. Things that no one would know. Then, I logged into the bill payment app and removed Marcus's email, which he had added to make it easier. Every click of mine on that screen was like a step out of the grave, where they wanted to bury me alive. I spent the whole morning in silence. When Rachel woke up and found me in the living room, she faked a smile and asked if I wanted help with coffee. I replied with a vacant look, as if I hadn't even understood properly. "What, honey? Is it lunchtime yet?" She laughed, but inside I laughed more. I had started my theater. I was going to play with their cards. I started to feign confusion. Light. Subtle. I changed the names of the neighbors, left the faucet running for a few seconds longer, asked twice what day of the week it was. Gradually I faded away, just in front of them. But when I was alone, oh, there I was me. I took an old tape recorder that I used in the hospital, kept at the bottom of a box with Charles's stuff. Tested. Worked. I started walking around with it in my dress pocket. He called whenever Marcus or Rachel approached. He recorded everything. The comments, the insinuations, the plans said, as if talking about the climate. I became a spectator of my own judgment, and their every word was another piece in the puzzle of lies. On Monday night, we were in the living room when Rachel casually remarked, "Albert is coming tomorrow afternoon with the papers. It will be fast, just signing." I looked at her sweetly, as if she didn't understand very well, and smiled. "Ah, papers, is it? Good to know." She smiled back, thinking I was a sweet old woman, completely at the mercy of the younger one's cleverness. But I had already given my first check. That night I wrote a letter. Long. No date. No specific recipient. It was for myself. I wrote down everything I was feeling, what I had seen, heard, endured. I kept it in the same envelope where my birth certificate was, folded next to old photos. And along with the letter, I put a copy of the camera recordings. My history was not going to be erased, not even silent. And you know, there's one thing I learned at that age. Pain changes shape. When we are young, the pain shows itself in crying, screaming, revolting. But when we've lived long enough, it turns into silence. And silence can be a powerful weapon, because he observes, he waits, and when it acts, no one sees where it came from. Sometimes I wonder how many women there are out there, sitting in their own homes, feeling foreign, invisible, silenced. Women who gave everything, and now live as if they were no longer their own masters. If you've ever felt this way, comment here for me. He writes, "I know how it is," or "I understand you." Because perhaps, when reading, someone else will also feel less alone. On Tuesday morning, I set the kitchen table as if nothing was happening. Pancakes, coffee, jam. Marcus came down in his t-shirt, yawning, and said, "Albert texted. It's on its way." I smiled, with that same smile I learned from my mother, the kind of smile that others think is innocent, but that hides a world behind it. He had no idea what awaited him, and little did he know that the visit of such a lawyer would be very different from what they had planned. Want to know what happened when Albert knocked on the door? Get ready, because that was their first stumble, and I was ready to see the castle of lies start to crack. When Albert arrived that afternoon, Rachel ran to the kitchen to fix her hair, and Marcus cleaned the papers that were in the living room as if they were receipts. I sat in my corner, with my knitting in my lap, pretending to be distracted, but every fiber of me was on alert. The man was tall, well-dressed, with a soft voice, and that lawyer smile that thinks he is always one step ahead. "Good afternoon, Mrs. Bessie," he said, with a sympathy that did not convince me for a second. "I came here just to formalize a few things that Marcus has already explained." I just nodded. He sat down at the table, took out of his briefcase a bundle of papers with colored paper clips and markers. "Simple thing," he continued. "It's just a trust authorization, a temporary transfer of asset management, just to facilitate the procedures while you are in recovery." I pretended not to understand, asked him to repeat, made him explain again. And when he spoke the third time, as if I were a child, he just smiled. "It's very kind of you, doctor. But I can read everything calmly later, right? Those small print tires me." Rachel interrupted impatiently. "Mom, just sign. We're solving everything for you." I closed my smile. I looked into her eyes for a few seconds longer than I should have, and in that moment, she felt it. I know you did. But that wasn't the worst day. The worst was 2 weeks later, when I went to the hospital and found out, there at the reception, that my supplementary health plan had been canceled. The attendant, embarrassed, said that it was no longer possible to schedule an appointment with my specialist, that the agreement had been terminated by family decision. I stood there, holding my bag with both hands, listening to the buzz of the waiting room around and trying to process the humiliation. I left without saying anything, just walking slowly back home, as if carrying a sentence on his back. The next day, I realized that the car Marcus was using, and which had been in the family name since Charles, had disappeared from the garage. When I asked, he replied in a dry way, "We sold it. I needed to pay off some debts. It's hard for everyone, Mom. Difficult for everyone. But I was the one who did the shopping for the house. I was still the one who paid the electricity bill. I was the one who was alone with the bags at the market, climbing the steps with my hips hurting. One of these Saturdays, I came back from the supermarket with 3 heavy bags. I climbed the stairs slowly, leaning on the walls. When I reached the halfway point, my vision darkened for an instant. I felt the dizziness coming, a pressure in my ears. I sat on the step so I wouldn't fall, and there, sitting with plastic bags cutting my fingers and the sweat running down my back, I understood. They didn't just want the house. They wanted to see how far I resisted. It was a test, a cruel game of emotional emptying. And yet, I didn't cry. That same week, I went to the clinic where my old doctor, Dr. Lisa Hamilton, still attended. I called, scheduled, went on foot. I spoke to her looking into her eyes. He said, "I need a cognitive exam. Complete. With report. Official." She looked at me carefully, as if she understood without needing details. "Let's do it, yes, Mrs. Bessie." I brought her flowers at the end of the appointment. She gave me a long hug. That was more than a clinical gesture. It was respect. From her office, I went straight to the public library. I used the computer to search. Lawyer specializing in elderly protection, North Carolina. It took hours to find a name that inspired confidence. Alan Becker. I called the next day. "Mrs. Bessie, I can have you next Thursday." And I went, with my brown folder, with my notes, with the tape recorder, with copies of everything. Me, an old woman invisible to many. Now she was a woman at war, in silence, but at war. He listened to me for more than an hour. He did not interrupt. When I finished, he just said, "You did everything right. But now, it's up to me." And at that moment, I felt that I was no longer alone. We think that rock bottom is the place where pain lives. But no, rock bottom is also the place where courage is born. And it was there, when they canceled my plan, sold my car, and tried to erase my existence, that I saw a strength born in me that I no longer knew I had. Because when they take everything from us, that's when we find out what it's really worth. Do you want to know how was the first meeting between this lawyer, Alan Becker, and that Albert, their lawyer? I was there, and you won't believe what happened, because it was that day that the tables have really turned, and the first mask fell. The consultation with attorney Alan Becker ended with a firm, eye-to-eye handshake. When I left his office, I didn't go home straight away. I crossed the street and entered a coffee shop where Charles and I had coffee on our days off. I ordered a strong espresso, sat at the same table as always, near the window, and watched the movement of the city as if observing time, because that's what I was doing, waiting for the right time to act. And she had arrived. I returned home that afternoon with the certainty that the kind old woman who lived there was leaving, not angry, not even with a grudge, but firmly. It was a silent farewell from the part of me that still expected some decency from Marcus and Rachel. Now, there was no room for illusion, and as they say, when a woman understands that she was betrayed by the person she created, she stops asking and starts tasting. The next morning, I called an old hospital colleague, Shirley. We worked together for 20 years in the geriatric ward of the Presbyterian. Shirley always had a sharp head, and after retiring from nursing, she went to study law. Today, she works with geriatric law. When I heard my voice on the phone, she recognized it right away. "Bessie, oh my, how long ago?" Her voice made my chest warm, as if someone had turned on a light in a dark room. I arranged to meet her in a discreet cafe, on the other side of the city. I told him everything. I showed the recordings. She listened to everything in silence, without interrupting once. When he finished, he shook my hand and said, "They messed with the wrong person." With Shirley's help, I organized all the videos and audios I had recorded, including that damn passage in which Rachel said, "With Alzheimer's or without, she signs." That there, Shirley said, was gold in the form of proof. Together we set up organized folders, named by dates, times, context. Shirley recommended me to buy an encrypted pen drive, one of those that can be opened only with a password and that has copy protection. I bought 2. In one, I put all the recordings. In the other, I kept scanned copies of the most important documents in the house. The 2 were locked in a safe deposit box I rented from a low-key bank in downtown Charlotte. Nobody knew. Neither did Marcus. Neither did Rachel. Nobody. I created a new secure email without my name and sent everything there too. Shirley guided me step by step. Don't underestimate what can happen when the truth has proof. And I didn't underestimate it. For the first time in months, I slept with a relieved chest. I knew I still had a lot to do, but now, I was no longer vulnerable. I was prepared. Inside, something had changed. I started to walk around the house differently. I spoke less. I observed more. Marcus tried to joke with me on a Sunday. "Mom, you're very quiet." And I just replied, "Silence is a luxury for those who have seen too much." He laughed, disconcerted. Rachel looked at me with eyes that sought fragility, but found stone. If this piece of my life can become a mirror or a hug for someone, will it help me to carry it forward? Like and subscribe here to the channel. It makes more difference than you think. Sometimes our voice just needs to find a right ear to become strength. In the following days, I began to organize everything around me as if preparing a farewell. I didn't know yet how this story would end, but I knew that, if it were up to me, they would taste their own poison. Not with screams, but with facts. Silence was now my shield. And do you want to know what the day was like when Marcus and Rachel realized they were no longer dealing with the same Bessie? That day, it started with an envelope, and it ended with a silence that they never forgot. Just wait and see. The first time I heard the word financial abuse said out loud was on a date with Shirley and Alan Becker. We were in the office meeting room, with the documents organized on the table, and the heavy silence of someone who is dealing with something too ugly to be said anyway. Shirley looked at me and said firmly, "That's what they're doing to you, Bessie. Has a name. And there is punishment. It's a crime." And when she used the word crime, something lined up inside me. Because until then, I saw myself only as a deceived old woman, a hurt mother. But hearing that what they were doing to me was illegal, not just immoral, gave me a kind of strength that no tears could give. And more than strength, gave me direction. In the United States, there is a specific law to protect the elderly from financial abuse. Shirley showed me the articles. Alan explained how the process works. With the documents and recordings that you have, we can configure an attempt at misappropriation, forgery, psychological manipulation, and fraud. And that, Bessie, can lead to imprisonment, suspension of rights, and loss of access to any asset they want in your name. I listened to everything quietly. I just shook my head, because more than punishing, I wanted them to understand that I wasn't weak. I never was. With Alan's guidance and support from Dr. Lisa Hamilton, I was able to get in touch with a retired local police private investigator, Mr. Darnell, a discreet man, attentive eyes, few words. He came into my house like an ordinary plumber on a Wednesday afternoon while Marcus and Rachel were away. In less than an hour, he installed 3 cameras with audio, hidden in strategic places. One in the living room lamp, another in the bookshelf decoration, and a last one in the kitchen wall clock. These don't have an app on their cell phones. They record directly on the card, without emitting a signal, invisible even to technicians, he explained. I smiled gratefully. Now, every word spoken in that house would be heard, and, this time, with double registration. Rachel and Marcus, for their part, were increasingly confident. They spoke loudly, disdained my soap operas, commented on what they would do with the money in the house after I was placed in a more suitable place. They used these cold, technical words, as if they were talking about a piece of furniture that needs to be transferred. Their naivety in believing that I was confused was almost comical, but I didn't laugh. I watched, and he wrote it down. In the meantime, my cognitive report came out. Dr. Lisa called me into the office and handed me the envelope. Full capacity, lucidity compatible with age, with no signs of impairment. I read those words as if they were a shield. I kept the report with the evidence. It was another piece on the board, and the board was now mine. The house where I lived for more than 30 years, where I raised my son, where I buried my husband, had become a battlefield. But they didn't know. They thought they were winning, that they were almost there. Marcus was talking on the phone with lawyer Albert, as if I was already out of the game. Tuesday now she signs. After that, we just need to forward the paperwork for sale. I listened to these conversations from the kitchen, stirring the spoon in the pan calmly, pretending not to understand, and every word went straight to the camera's memory card. There was one afternoon in particular that I will never forget. We were in the living room, and Marcus said that maybe I should start thinking about moving. Rachel added, "There's a nursing home in Greensboro, beautiful. It has a garden, activities. You'd love it." I looked at her and said, "Garden is good, but not everyone knows how to plant what they should." She didn't understand. Marcus laughed, and I went back to my knitting. I know it seems like a lot of pain for one life, but believe me, the most striking of this story is yet to come. And when it comes, you'll understand why I had to hold everything in silence for so long. Now I had evidence, reports, a trusted lawyer, an old ally, and recordings clearer than any testimony. The only thing I needed was to choose the right moment to turn the key, and he was closer than they imagined, because everything has changed. When the envelope they had been waiting for was delivered, and inside it had nothing to think of. Want to know what it was? Get ready, because it was there that they saw for the first time who the real owner of the house was. The envelope arrived on a rainy Friday, a motorcycle delivery man, paper a little damp from the drops that fell from the sky. Rachel took his hand with an anxious smile, ran to the kitchen, and called Marcus. "It's from Cooper Finance," she said, almost breathless. I heard it from the living room. Cooper Finance. The name was not strange to me, but at that moment, I pretended not to know. I watched from the armchair, with the blanket on my legs and my heart alert. They entered the room and closed the door, but I already knew what it was. And I knew because Mr. Darnell had shown me. 3 days earlier, he had given me a report with the latest bank accesses made in my name. It contained a recent loan, in the amount of $18,000 requested online. Name, Bessie M. Carter. Address, mine. Social Security number, mine too. Only, electronic signature? It wasn't mine. I had never seen it. He used his identity, Mrs. Bessie. This is fraud. Federal crime. That's what the detective said, with that calm tone of someone who has seen this kind of thing more times than he would like. I remember looking at the paper, the transaction number, and then my own handwriting, in the old bills in the drawer. It was a painful contrast. My whole life has always been handwritten. Checks, notes, birthday messages, and now my name had been typed into a digital contract by someone I carried on my lap. And it didn't stop there. Rachel, according to the records Darnell also obtained, had presented a false medical receipt at a clinic where I had never set foot. He claimed reimbursement for my treatment. Price, $640. Payment with my card. Statement signed, according to her, by Bessie herself. But that lyric, it wasn't mine either. The signature was a soulless curve, a draft of what I am. When I listened to the audio in which Marcus said, "If she finds out, we say she forgot that she authorized it. She's a little confused. No one will doubt it." I didn't cry. I closed my eyes, and in that darkness, I saw more clearly than ever. They weren't just cheating on me. They were burying me alive in parcels, one disrespect at a time, one robbery on each side, and all in the name of their convenience. They counted on my silence, with my tiredness, at the age I carry in my bones, but they forgot the strength that still lives in my spirit. No, sometimes we think we know someone because we saw them born, because he breastfed, because she stayed up at night by the bed, holding her hand with a fever. But life has a cruel way of showing those who have always been waiting for the chance to show the worst of themselves. And when this truth arrives, it tears our souls. There are things that we remember until the end. It doesn't matter how much time passes. Like that day when I saw Charles kneel down to propose to me on the balcony of our first house, or the day I buried my mother holding her scarf in my lap. There are memories that get stuck in the skin. And this discovery, this betrayal, entered this list. What about you? Which memory has never left you? Share it with me in the comments. Tell me if you've ever been through something like this, or if you've heard a similar story. Sometimes sharing the weight, even in words, relieves the soul. From then on, I was no longer just a deceived woman. I was a woman armed with evidence. Every detail the detective brought, every number, every recording, was a real bullet in the drum of my silence. And I decided, I'm not just going to watch anymore. I will act, but not in the way they expect. The attack would not be shouting, nor confrontation. It would be a surgical movement, accurate, as I learned in so many nights in nursing. It will hurt, yes, but it will heal what needs to be cut. The first step was on the bench, the second, at the notary's office, and the third? Oh, the third step was to be taken right in front of them, with witnesses, because if they thought they could erase me without anyone seeing, they were about to discover that those who live in the dark see better than others. Want to know what it was like when Marcus realized I knew everything? It was a look, a single look, and when I looked, he knew. But this, I'll tell you right away, because what's next? No one was prepared to see it, not even me. It was an ordinary Friday, but the smell of dinner that night seemed different. Rachel prepared a roast chicken, buttered vegetables, and well-seasoned mashed potatoes, a rare thing coming from her. He used to cook in a hurry, complaining about everything, letting the pots burn. But that night, there was zeal, silence too, the kind of silence that precedes an announcement. The table was set, the glasses lined up, cloth napkins, which we never used, and even a candle lit in the center. I sat on the end, as always, and watched Marcus and Rachel exchange discreet glances. They talked pleasantries at first. They asked if I had liked the food, if I wanted more water, if I was feeling well. I just nodded, fork resting on the plate. After a few minutes, Rachel went to her bag, took a thick ivory envelope and placed it on the table, next to my plate. "Mom, it's just some medical insurance papers," she said, smiling in that sweet tone she only used when she wanted something. "The people of the plan asked to update the subscription because of the new electronic registration." Marcus added, "It's routine, no big deal. If you can sign today, it makes it easier for us to solve this tomorrow." I took the envelope without haste. My fingers slid over the seal before opening. Inside there were 7 pages, with fine print, technical terms, and words like transfer of management, irrevocable clause, authorization of third parties. I turned each leaf as if folding an old sheet, with respect, but firmly. I was silent for a few seconds. Rachel's spoon stopped in midair. Marcus wiped his mouth even though he hadn't eaten. That's when I spoke. "I'll show it to my lawyer tomorrow." The sentence came out low, firm, round. Rachel choked on the water. Marcus turned pale. His fork slammed into the plate, making a dry sound. "Mother," he began, forcing a smile. "It's just routine paperwork. You don't need a lawyer for that." I stared at him. Long, not as a mother, but as a whole woman. "Do you still think I can't read, Marcus?" The air in the room changed. Rachel lowered her eyes. Marcus dropped the napkin in his lap, as if losing the game in the middle of the match. The table was silent, like a wake. But there, it was no one's death. It was the birth of something. They noticed. Somehow, they knew I was seeing beyond, but they didn't know how much, nor how. I continued eating in silence. I cut off another piece of the chicken, chewed, swallowed. With every second, their embarrassment increased, and I felt, inside, the taste of a victory that was still being cooked over a slow fire. The difference is that now, I was the one who controlled the stove. At the end of dinner, I got up from the table before them. I took the papers, put them in the envelope, and went up to my room. Before closing the door, I looked over my shoulder and said, "Tomorrow is Saturday. I won't be home in the morning. I have a commitment at the center." Rachel mumbled something I didn't understand. Marcus just nodded, and I climbed, step by step, with the certainty that that night, the house would have no peace. You know, there are moments in life that mark like a knife in wood, moments you never forget, because they saw it. They changed the course of the river, and for me, this dinner was one of those. Not for the food, nor for silence, but because, for the first time, Marcus and Rachel didn't just see an elderly woman in front of them. They saw a threat, a woman who knows, that you saw, that feels, And that now responds. But what they didn't know yet, it's just that all that paperwork, printed in a hurry, little did she know what she was about to provoke. Because instead of my signature, they were going to receive a visit. And this visit, it would come with more than words. Want to know what happened when my lawyer knocked on our door in the middle of breakfast? Oh, wait to see what they did when they saw his black briefcase in his hand. Rachel's expression? That, I will never forget it. On Saturday, before the sun rose properly, I was already up. I put on my navy blue dress, the linen dress that Charles said made me look like a judge, and maybe he was right. I tied my hair, put on my flat shoes, and left the house with my black leather briefcase firm in my hands. Inside it, each document was like a brick, firm, heavy, necessary. I didn't tremble anymore. I walked with the right step of someone who, for the first time in a long time, felt that the house was no longer collapsing. I was the one who was building the new one. The first stop was at the Mecklenburg County Registry Office. Alan was already there, waiting for me. We signed the complete revocation of any previous authorization. No paper signed by me, under any pretext, could be used by Marcus or Rachel anymore. I also made a new testament, a simple, straightforward one with 2 beneficiaries, the Charles Carter Memorial Foundation for Palliative Care, and Donna, my neighbor who visited me every Sunday without ever asking for anything in return. Marcus and Rachel have been officially removed from any mention, not out of revenge, but for justice. They had already taken too much. After the notary's office, we went to the bank. At the branch, I explained that I needed to restrict any external access to my account. The attendant, kindly, guided me to set up biometric validation with fingerprint reading and facial recognition. I also asked for the cancellation of the additional card linked to my account, the same one Rachel used to fill up the car, pay for the salon, and buy the expensive cheeses that she said were for me. I cut the card right there, in 2 parts, and left it on the manager's desk. "It won't be necessary anymore," I said. She just smiled, with a glow of someone who understood more than she said. I returned home around 2 in the afternoon. The sky was clear, but the weather indoors, loaded. Marcus was in the living room, cell phone in hand. Rachel heated something in the microwave without saying a word. As soon as I entered, they both stopped. They looked at me as if they knew, and they knew. Rachel was the first to speak. "Was there movement in the bank?" he asked, his voice tense. I calmly closed the door, put my bag on the chair, and replied without taking off my coat. "Now you don't have to worry about my finances. I will take care of everything myself." The silence was like thunder. Marcus stood up, nervous, but said nothing. Rachel slammed the microwave door and went upstairs. I went to the kitchen, filled a glass of water, and drank calmly. No screaming, no explanation, no scenes. Only the weight of reality settling on them. For the first time, I was the mirror, and they were being forced to see each other for real. That night, we had dinner in silence. Marcus looked at me sideways, as if trying to guess what else I knew. Rachel did not show up. The house had changed ownership, even without changing address, and I, sitting at the end of the table, was no longer the old woman who needed help. She was the woman they could no longer manipulate. It's curious how sometimes we don't need to raise our voices to be heard. Just stop allowing. And there, that night, between the noise of the cutlery and the uncomfortable silence, I knew that I had cut the last wire they used to control me. Now, they were on their own. And so did I. But the difference is that I was ready. Do you think they backed down? No, of course not. What they did next was even dirtier, but it was also the last mistake. And when they did, they were all recording, including me. They began to wither like cut flowers. First it was Marcus, walking from one side to the other, with that cell phone glued to his ear all day, talking quietly, mumbling things that he could barely understand. Afterwards, Rachel began to spend more time away from home, returning with deep, dark circles under her eyes and smudged lipstick, something she never let happen before. The tension was running down the walls of the house, and I just watched, sitting in my favorite armchair, with crochet on my lap and my cell phone hidden on my side. I followed the detective's recordings almost in real time, every sentence, every coup attempt, everything being filed, the truth becoming proof. It was on a clear Tuesday that I heard what made me most disgusted. Rachel, speaking on the phone in a soft voice, told a certain Molly who I later found out was an assistant in a psychiatric clinic, that I was having episodes of delirium, that I had yelled at her, confused names, and even threatened to hit her with a cane. We are concerned about her mental health. We think it might be late-stage Alzheimer's, she said, without even stuttering. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. The cane. It was Charles. It is leaning against the hall, as a souvenir. I never used it a single day. But in their mouths, my story turned into a disease. Marcus, on the side, suggested making an urgent appointment. If we get a report, we can ask for a judicial evaluation, freezing of assets due to incapacity and even temporary guardianship. Those words, coming out of my son's mouth, sounded like stabs to me. That boy I once rocked singing "Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star" now planned to hospitalize me as someone who plans to change cars. That was it. They had lost control, and in desperation, they began to get dirty for good. It was also on that day that the detective, Mr. Darnell, sent me a folder of filtered audios, and there it was, Marcus and Rachel talking to a broker named Dennis. The deed is still in her name, but we are resolving it. As soon as you file the guardianship process, we facilitate the sale. We already have a buyer interested, Marcus said, as if my house was already a ruin of war, land ready to be divided. Rachel added, "The place is old, but with renovation you can ask for about $340,000. We can advance 20% for the new rent in the meantime." I heard all that, calmly. It was an unhurried reckoning, and each sentence of theirs was a shovel of earth in its own grave. You know, there are things that we live and keep, but maybe by telling, we help another heart to breathe. And if this story, mine, so full of marks, can touch someone on the other side, enjoy this video. Sign up. Let's make this truth reach those who need to listen. Because sometimes, in the midst of abandonment, what saves is knowing that someone understands. Their reaction showed everything: fear, an attempt to reverse the roles, to make me look like the crazy woman in the story. But I was sober, lucid, clearer than ever. The fake psychiatric appointment was scheduled for Thursday, but what they didn't know? It's just that the one who was going to open the door of the house wouldn't be a confused lady waiting for help. It would be a woman with folders, true medical reports, a lawyer by her side, and a camera recording everything. They were so busy trying to shut me up that they forgot that I still had a voice. Do you want to know what happened when the consultation began? When did the professional see me and realize that I had prepared everything even before being touched? That's when things changed for good. Because the truth, it's just that the monsters that try to erase us tremble when the light comes on. And on that day, the light was just beginning to shine. I remember that Saturday as if it were today. The air was heavy, still, as if the house itself was holding its breath with me. I woke up before sunrise, made my coffee the way I always did, strong, very hot, and sat at the kitchen table, looking at the organized folders I had put together: audio, video, bank statements, transcripts, prints, dates, names, all labeled with a precision that not even the hospital where I worked for so many years could match. That morning, I wasn't just a 68-year-old lady. I was a woman who knew exactly what was about to happen. 2 days earlier, at the meeting with attorney Alan Becker and Detective Darnell, I had turned everything in. When I say everything, that's all. The videos of Marcus saying that my house was worth more dead than alive, the audios of Rachel wanting to diagnose me with Alzheimer's just to be able to control my life, the copy of the loan they made in my name, the attempt to sell the house, with a broker already involved. I watched Mr. Becker flip through each document with the calmness of someone who is used to dealing with well-dressed monsters. At the end, he took a deep breath and said, "Ms. Bessie, this is one of the most thorough cases of financial abuse I've ever seen. It will be impossible for them to escape." It was there that I felt, for the first time, that justice had an address, and it was mine. As he spoke, I looked out the window and saw my own reflection in the glass, and I thought, my God, how does a lifetime of love end like this? But soon after, the answer came. It doesn't end. It transforms. And at that moment, I understood something that might be useful for you too, that you are here listening to me. Sometimes we spend decades being strong for each other, and only discover that we also deserve to be defended when we are already at the limit. That's why I say, stay with me until the end. The most important part of my story is about to begin. When Saturday came, Marcus and Rachel were certain that they were going to get me to sign the final papers. I heard them whispering in the morning, thinking I was in the shower. Today she signs Marcus. Pretend to be calm. She's more confused these days. Great. After today we will solve everything. I almost smiled. The irony of life is that sometimes those who think they are about to win, he doesn't even realize that he lost a long time ago. At 9:42 a.m., the doorbell rang. I was in the kitchen, stirring my coffee for the second time, as if it were a normal day. But inside me, there was a fire-filled silence. Rachel went to answer. "Who is it?" she asked, with the authoritarian tone she used when she wanted to look like the owner of the house. On the other side, a male voice replied firmly, "Bailiffs of Mecklenburg County, we need to talk to Marcus Jones and Rachel Miller." The sound of that name, officers, streaked through the hallway like contained thunder. I heard footsteps. I heard their urgent murmur. I heard Rachel whisper, "My God, Marcus, what have you done?" And then I heard the door opening. I heard the officer's voice repeating the names. I heard the paper being handed over. Marcus tried to maintain his pose. There must be a mistake. But justice is not so easily deceived. You are being formally notified that you are under investigation for financial abuse against the elderly, attempted fraud, forgery, and misappropriation of assets. The residence is under immediate judicial protection. You cannot leave with personal belongings other than those listed. I stayed in the kitchen. He didn't need to show up. It wasn't my scene. It wasn't my theater. It was their little theater, falling apart. I could only observe their figure through the reflection of the microwave. The two of them, pale, lost, not understanding how everything had turned so fast. But it didn't turn quickly. I just didn't say anything as I turned. Rachel cried, saying that I was ungrateful, that they just wanted to help. One of the officers, a large man in a calm voice, replied, "Madam, we have hours of recordings where you actively participate in the attempt to illegally obtain the property. It's better not to say anything." Marcus looked inside the house, maybe looking for me, maybe hoping that I would show up to defend him as I have done all my life. But I kept sitting, quiet, breathing slowly, and at that moment, I swear, I felt every piece of my heart come back into place. They were escorted to the sidewalk. The neighbors, of course, began to open curtains. But you know what? For the first time in a long time, I felt no shame. I felt relief. I felt that, finally, my life, the one they tried to take from me, was coming back into my hands. And if you think this is the end, oh, honey, isn't it? Because now that the official justice has entered, here comes the hardest part, and the most dangerous. And that's what I'm going to tell you in the next part. Want to know what Marcus tried to do after the notification? Want to know what their last card was before the complete fall? So stay with me. The worst is not over yet, but the best, neither is it. I remember as if it were yesterday the day Marcus and Rachel started falling. Not all at once, not with noise, but the way arrogant people fall, stumbling over their own lie. After the bailiffs left my door, the house was eerily silent, almost empty. I sat there in my kitchen, looking at the cup of coffee that had already cooled, and realized that for the first time in many months, I could breathe without fear. But the battle was still far from over. In the following days, Marcus tried everything to defend himself. She called distant relatives saying that I was confused, tried to convince friends that the audios had been manipulated, and even sent a message feigning concern. "Mom, you need to understand that all this was a misunderstanding." When I read that, I almost laughed. The misunderstanding, my son, was that I taught you that love didn't need limits. Rachel, on the other hand, preferred the path of aggressiveness. She sent emails to my lawyer saying that I was unstable, that I was being coerced, that the detective had fabricated evidence. But videos don't lie. And it was these videos that the prosecutor saw. It was these videos that showed her saying, with all the letters, "She won't even know what she signed. Old people forget." When the scandal began to circulate, Rachel lost her job at the clinic where she worked. The official justification was unethical conduct. But the truth is that no one wants to be around people who plot against their elderly mother-in-law. Marcus, in turn, received the news that all assets in his name were frozen. The $18,000 loan made using my data, The banks were not amused at all. He tried to argue that I had authorized it, but there was the recording of him saying, "If she finds out, we say she forgot." It's curious how life charges with our own words. The neighborhood also reacted. People who used to smile at the couple when they passed on the street began to close the door. When Marcus walked to the car, pretending that nothing had happened, he could see the curtains moving. Elizabeth is a quiet place, but there is no calm that can hold back gossip from cruel people. On one of those days, Donna knocked on my door with a walnut cake, the way she's been doing it since they moved here. He sat with me on the porch, looked at the plants drying in the heat and said, "Bessie, I always knew something was wrong." Marcus never looked them in the eye, and Rachel always had venom in her voice. I didn't answer with words. I only looked at her with those eyes that learned to smile after a lot of pain. In silence, I thanked him, because there is a type of justice that the legal system does not achieve. Moral justice. The justice of seeing the mask fall. The justice of seeing those who tried to reduce you be reduced by their own greed. And sometimes, this justice is the sweetest. But as I felt this relief begin to spread through my chest, I also knew one thing, and maybe you'll notice this with me. Defeated villain doesn't mean conformed villain. It was a matter of time before Marcus made the last attempt, the one that every desperate traitor tries when he realizes he has lost everything. And that's exactly what happened. Do you want to know what my son's last card was? The lowest of all? To what could it have put everything to waste? That's what I'm going to tell you in the next part. Because at that moment, their fall was not yet over, but my deliverance was just beginning. That morning, when the house was finally mine again, I sat on the edge of the bed and stared at my own hands. Hands that once held my son when he was little, that wrote on-call reports during entire nights in the hospital, that wiped away tears that no one saw fall, and who now held, for the first time in a long time, my own life back. The silence of the house was no longer the silence of fear. It was a silence full of fresh air, space, the future. I slowly went down the stairs, still feeling my body frail, but my soul, this one was firmer than ever. I went to the kitchen, opened the windows and let the sun in, as if I was washing everything that had been impregnated there for months. The kettle sizzled, and I prepared a chamomile tea, one of those I always made when I needed to understand something inside me, and I had a lot to understand. When I sat down with the hot cup in my hands, the first thing I felt was a deep urge to cry. Not of sadness, but of liberation. I cried for all the times I kept quiet so as not to cause conflict. I cried for every silent dinner, for every shaming in disguise, for every night I wondered if I was losing my mind when in fact they were trying to make me believe it. I cried for the love I had, and that didn't deserve to die like that. But mostly, I cried for myself, that I had finally chosen to live my own life, not the life I was expected to accept. After the crying, there was a calm that I hadn't felt maybe since Charles was still alive. I got up, washed my face, put on a light perfume, and started to prepare a batch of oatmeal cookies. I had promised to take some to the community center, where I began to attend some painting classes for ladies. I never imagined that at the age of 68, I would discover that I liked to paint huge flowers, in colors that didn't even exist in the garden. But there, in that room full of women with stories as hard as mine, I relearned how to talk, to laugh, to breathe without asking permission. I discovered that there was still life left inside of me, life that no one had the right to measure, judge, or try to steal. As the cookies baked, I leaned against the countertop and stared out over the backyard. The wind shook the leaves of the oak tree that Charles planted in our first year in that house, and I realized that, even after all, the house hadn't been scarred by horror. It had been scarred by courage. It was there that I really understood. They underestimated me because they confused silence with weakness, but my silence was never empty. He was sharp. He was attentive. It was the kind of silence that protects, who observes, who acts at the right time. And don't think that I've come to hate Marcus. No. What I felt was something else, a kind of grief. The mourning for the son I thought I had, and who may never have really existed in that beautiful way I imagined. But grief also brought liberation, because now, without the obligation to carry the guilt for him, I could finally carry only myself. I took the cookies, put them on a nice tray, and was ready to go. But before closing the door, I looked at the whole house one more time. The hallway. The room. The rug that Marcus spilled juice on when he was 5. The table where Rachel tried to trick me with fake papers. The window through which the sun entered without fear. And I thought, I survived. 3 simple words. But that, for those who have been at the bottom of the well, mean an entire world. As I walked to Donna's car, which had offered to take me, I felt something inside me that I hadn't felt in months. Hope. A new, mature, tranquil hope. A hope that it does not expect from others. It expects from itself. I knew that the legal process was still going on, that there were scheduled hearings, reports, testimonies, but that no longer scared me. I did my part. I protected myself. I told the truth. And now it was the world that needed to respond to it. And maybe it's important for me to tell you this, because it's something I learned with pain, but also with dignity. The strength we need doesn't come when everything is collapsing. It arrives when we decide, even though we are shaking, to stand up. And there, walking to the car with a tray of cookies in my hands, I felt more on my feet than in all the last few years. But don't think that it all ended there. No, because there was still one last conversation to go. One I couldn't avoid. One that I had to face with an open heart and firm. Do you want to know what happened when Marcus last tried to talk to me? Do you want to know what words were said in that phone call that closed, once and for all, an entire cycle of my life? So stay with me, because that's what I'm going to tell you in the next part. At the end of it all, when the process was over, when Marcus was granted a court ban from approaching me and Rachel left this neighborhood without looking back, I found myself alone in my house for the first time in many months, but alone in a good way, in a way that gives air back to my lungs. The prosecution continued with the case, and although I do not seek to know the details, I know that both are still responsible for the crimes they committed. Sometimes I wonder if they think of me, but the truth is that it no longer weighs on my chest. Today, I wake up early, open my windows, let the sun in everywhere and prepare my coffee with the peace that I have regained. I went back to my painting classes. I help out at the community center on Sundays, and Donna jokes that I'm more alive now than I was 10 years ago. Maybe it is. What I experienced taught me that we can be good, we can love, we can give, but it should never be a race to fit in anyone's hand. I learned that silence is not submission, it is choice, and when used clearly, it becomes the most elegant weapon that time gives to those who have suffered too much. If there is one lesson that remains from this journey, it is this. No matter how much they try to diminish you, no one can take from you what you rebuild from the inside out. The dignity, this is not negotiable. And if you've been through something similar, or know someone who has felt their own voice being stifled, know that there's still time to start over. There is still time to open the door of your own house and say, here I am the one who decides. Thank you, really, for walking with me here. Your company makes this chapter that I have carried for so long in my chest less heavy. If this story touched you in any way, leave a like. It comes as a warm hug, one of those that we don't need to ask for. And if you want to come back for a coffee with me and other stories, subscribe to the channel. It's like always leaving the door open for the next visit. Also tell me in the comments which city you're listening to me. I love to imagine where my voice is going. And it activates the bell, my dear. That way you don't miss out when the coffee is brewed again. Don't go away yet. Listen to the next true story that will appear on the screen. Always remember, each wrinkle tells a story, and each story carries a strength. Watch the next video here on the channel with another incredible story.